Stop. The word cut clean through the low hum of the field hospital, sharp as steel but quieter, controlled, practiced, the kind of voice that expected the world to obey without hesitation. Yet her hands did not move. Not an inch. Not a tremor. The air inside the canvas tent held the weight of rain-soaked uniforms and antiseptic, thick and unmoving, as if even the atmosphere itself was waiting for her to decide what mattered more. Anna Weiss did not look up. She did not acknowledge the voice, nor the authority behind it. Her fingers remained steady, pressing against the young soldier's chest, counting something only she seemed to hear. Outside, somewhere beyond the dim lantern light, boots moved through mud, engines idled, orders were passed from one man to another like currency. Inside, time narrowed. Slowed. Focused into a single fragile rhythm beneath her palms. She had learned this long before the war turned everything into ruins. Back when her hands meant healing, not survival. Back when the world still believed in lines that should not be crossed. Now she was a prisoner in a country that no longer felt like her own, wearing a uniform that marked her as the enemy, surrounded by men who had every reason not to trust her. And still, her hands did not move. Captain James Walker stood 3 feet away, his boots planted firm on the wooden planks, posture rigid, eyes trained on the scene with the discipline of a man who had spent years making decisions others could not. He had seen hesitation cost lives. He had learned to measure worth in seconds, to weigh one life against another without letting doubt slow him down. The soldier on the table was not his priority. There were others. There was always someone who needed saving more. That was the rule. That was how order was maintained when chaos tried to take everything. That's an order, he said again, quieter this time, not louder, not angrier, just firmer, as if clarity alone should be enough. Around them, movement paused. A medic held a tray midair. Another man stopped writing. No one spoke. They all watched the same thing, a German nurse, a prisoner of war, choosing not to respond. Anna inhaled slowly, barely visible, her focus unbroken. The soldier beneath her was still. Too still. But not gone. Not yet. She had seen the difference before. The subtle shift between absence and possibility. The space where most people gave up. She did not work in that space. She stayed in it. Lived in it. Protected it. Her voice, when it came, was low, steady, almost lost beneath the soft patter of rain against canvas. He's still here. Not defiant. Not pleading. Just certain. Walker stepped closer, close enough now to see the precision in her hands, the control, the refusal to rush. He studied her, searching for hesitation, for fear, for anything that suggested she might break under pressure. But there was nothing. No challenge in her eyes. No rebellion in her posture. Just a quiet refusal to let go before it was time. And for the first time since entering the tent, he did not speak immediately. The room held its breath. So did he. The silence stretched just long enough to feel intentional, not accidental, as if the moment itself had decided to wait before choosing a side. Captain Walker shifted his weight slightly, the faint creak of the wooden floor the only sound that dared to break through the stillness. He had given orders like this 100 times before, on muddy roads, inside shattered buildings, under skies that never seemed to clear. Men followed them because they had to. Because hesitation was dangerous. Because structure was the only thing holding everything together. Yet here, in a dimly lit tent that smelled faintly of iodine and damp canvas, that structure met something it could not easily move. Anna's hands remained where they were, steady, deliberate, as if the world outside the narrow space between her palms no longer existed. She counted in silence, not with numbers but with instinct, feeling for a rhythm that others might have missed. It was faint. Almost nothing. But not nothing. And that difference mattered. A drop of rain slipped through a seam in the canvas above and landed softly on the back of her wrist. She did not react. Her focus did not shift. Across from her, a young medic swallowed, unsure whether to step forward or step back, his training caught between two authorities that did not agree. He looked to Walker, waiting for the reinforcement of command, for the clarity that usually followed a repeated order. Walker did not repeat it. Not this time. Instead, he watched. He watched the way her shoulders remained relaxed, not tense. He watched the way her breathing matched the quiet pace of her work, not rushed, not forced. He had seen panic before. This was not panic. He had seen defiance before too, loud, emotional, reckless. This was none of those things. This was something else. Something quieter. Something harder to confront because it did not push back, it simply did not move. "You are risking time we do not have," he said finally, his voice lower now, less in order and more in observation placed carefully into the space between them. Anna did not look up, but her voice came again, just as steady as before. "If I stop now, there will be nothing left to return to." The words did not challenge him. They did not accuse him. They simply existed, like a fact placed on a table. Around them, the others listened without moving, caught in a moment that felt larger than a single decision. Walker exhaled slowly, his gaze dropping for a fraction of a second to the soldier beneath her hands, then back to her face. He was used to certainty. To clear lines. To knowing which choice served the greater need. But certainty, he realized, had a different shape here. It was not in his voice. It was in her hands. Another second passed. Then another. Somewhere in the distance, a truck engine started, then faded. Inside the tent, the rhythm under her palms shifted, barely noticeable, but enough. Anna felt it before anyone else could. A fragile return. Incomplete, uncertain, but present. She adjusted her pressure slightly, her movements precise, almost imperceptible. Walker saw the change, not in what she said, but in what she did not say. And something in him, something trained to measure outcomes in the harshest terms, paused long enough to reconsider the weight of a single uninterrupted moment. The shift was small, almost invisible, but it was there, and once it appeared it refused to be ignored. Anna felt it first, a faint persistence beneath her hands, not strong enough to reassure, but steady enough to resist disappearing. She adjusted again, not with urgency, but with care, as if the slightest excess would undo what little had returned. The room did not move with her. It stayed suspended, every person inside it caught between what had been ordered and what was unfolding. Captain Walker's eyes narrowed slightly, not in suspicion, but in concentration. He stepped closer, just enough to see what she was seeing, or at least to try. He had learned to read men, to recognize fear, exhaustion, resolve. But this was different. This required patience, something he had been trained to respect but not always to trust when time was limited. "What changed?" he asked, not sharply, not as a challenge, but as a question that demanded clarity. Anna did not stop what she was doing. "Nothing changed," she said quietly. "It was always there. It just needed time." The words settled into the air with a kind of weight that did not push, but remained. Walker glanced briefly at the medic beside him, who looked back with uncertainty, then returned his attention to Anna's hands. He watched the rhythm she followed, the consistency, the absence of hesitation. It was not luck. It was not guesswork. It was knowledge carried in silence. Another moment passed. Then another. The soldier's chest responded, subtly, almost unwillingly, as if deciding whether to return or remain still. Anna did not react outwardly, but her focus deepened, her movements refining by fractions, guided by something no one else in the room could fully measure. Walker exhaled slowly, a breath he had not realized he was holding. He had made decisions faster than this, harsher than this, decisions that could not be undone. But this one did not belong to speed. It belonged to restraint. And restraint was not something he had been taught to rely on in the middle of uncertainty. Around them, the tension began to shift, not disappearing, but changing shape. The medic lowered the tray slightly. Another soldier leaned forward, just a fraction, as if trying to confirm what his eyes were telling him. No one spoke. They did not need to. The evidence was quiet, but present. Walker straightened, his posture still firm, but no longer rigid in the same way. His gaze moved from the soldier to Anna, studying her not as a prisoner, not as a variable, but as someone who understood something he had almost overlooked. The rain outside softened, its steady rhythm now blending into the quieter pulse inside the tent. For a brief moment, the war felt distant, reduced to a sound beyond the canvas walls. Inside, there was only the space between a command given and a choice made. Walker nodded once, a small motion, nearly imperceptible, but enough. "Continue," he said, his voice steady, carrying authority without resistance this time. Anna did not respond. She did not look up. Her hands had never left. And now, they did not need to. The word settled into the room without resistance, and with it, something unseen seemed to realign. Not loudly, not dramatically, but enough. The medic who had been frozen stepped forward again, slower this time, placing the tray down within reach as if entering a space that now belonged to someone else's rhythm. Anna did not acknowledge him, but her left hand shifted slightly, allowing space without losing contact, her attention still anchored to the fragile pattern beneath her fingertips. The soldier's breathing was uneven, shallow, uncertain, but it was no longer absent. That alone changed everything. Captain Walker remained where he was, but his presence no longer pressed against the room in the same way. It had shifted from command to observation, from control to something quieter, something more deliberate. He folded his arms loosely, not as a barrier, but as a pause, giving himself a moment to watch without intervening. He had spent years believing that action defined leadership, that movement and decision were the only ways forward. Yet here, stillness had done something his orders could not. The rain outside softened further, becoming a distant backdrop rather than a constant pressure, and the lantern light flickered gently against the canvas walls, casting shadows that moved slowly instead of sharply. Time expanded again, no longer compressed into urgency, but stretched into careful seconds that could be used, not fought against. Anna worked within those seconds with quiet precision, adjusting, listening, waiting. She did not rush the process. She did not try to force certainty where there was none. Each movement was measured, guided by experience that did not announce itself, but revealed itself through consistency. The medic followed her lead now without being told, handing her what she needed before she asked, learning her rhythm by watching rather than questioning. Across the tent, another soldier exhaled, a sound barely audible, but enough to release some of the tension that had held the room in place. Walker noticed it, the subtle shift in everyone present, the way uncertainty had begun to transform into cautious trust. Not in him, but in her. And that realization did not unsettle him. It clarified something. Leadership, he understood in that moment, was not always about being the one who acted. Sometimes it was about recognizing when someone else already knew what to do. He glanced once more at Anna, studying the steadiness in her posture, the absence of hesitation, the quiet refusal to abandon a life that had not yet chosen to leave. There was no need for acknowledgement. No need for approval. The work itself was enough. The soldier's breathing deepened slightly, still fragile, but more consistent now, like a signal slowly finding its strength. Anna adjusted once more, then held, her hands steady, her focus unchanged. Walker lowered his arms, not as a signal, not as a gesture, but simply because there was nothing left for him to hold on to. The moment no longer required him to decide. It required him to allow. And so he did, standing in silence as the outcome unfolded, not through force, but through patience he had almost overlooked. The rhythm held, not perfectly, not with certainty, but with enough presence to change the direction of the room. Anna remained exactly where she was, her hands steady, her focus unwavering, as if she understood that what mattered now was not what had been achieved, but what could still be lost if she allowed even a moment of distraction. The soldier's breathing found a fragile pattern, uneven but consistent, like something relearning how to exist 1 second at a time. The medic beside her adjusted his stance, no longer hesitant, his movements quieter now, more intentional, as if he had stepped into a different kind of instruction, one that did not come from words but from observation. Captain Walker turned slightly, his gaze moving across the tent, taking in the others, the way they had all shifted without realizing it. No one rushed. No one questioned. The urgency that had filled the space earlier had not disappeared, but it had been redirected, reshaped into something steadier, something that allowed precision instead of panic. He walked a few steps away, not leaving, but creating distance, giving the moment room to unfold without his presence pressing against it. Outside, the sound of boots passing through wet ground continued, the war moving forward as it always did, indifferent to what happened inside a single tent. But inside, something had slowed enough to be noticed. Anna adjusted her position slightly, easing the pressure just enough to test what remained beneath her hands. The response was immediate, faint but undeniable. She held there, not pushing further, not risking more than necessary. Her movements carried a quiet confidence, not because she expected success, but because she understood the cost of giving up too soon. Walker watched from a few feet away, his posture no longer rigid, his expression no longer fixed in command. He had seen victories before, loud and unmistakable, marked by orders executed and objectives secured. This was not that. This was quieter. Smaller. And yet, it held a different kind of weight, one that did not rely on recognition to matter. The soldier's chest rose again, a little deeper this time, as if the body had made a decision to continue. The medic exhaled softly, a breath he had been holding without realizing it, and stepped back half an inch, giving Anna the space she had already claimed without asking. No one spoke. There was no need to announce what was happening. It revealed itself in the smallest changes, in the way the room no longer felt suspended, in the way time resumed its natural pace instead of stretching thin under pressure. Walker lowered his gaze briefly, not in doubt, but in acknowledgement of something he had not accounted for when he first gave the order. He looked back at Anna, at the steadiness that had not wavered, at the decision she had made without permission and without defiance. And for the first time, he understood that what he had witnessed was not disobedience. It was discipline of a different kind. One that did not come from rank or authority, but from knowing exactly when not to stop. He did not speak again. He did not need to. The outcome was already taking shape, guided by hands that had never left, by a choice that had been made in silence and held without compromise. The change did not arrive all at once. It came in layers, quiet and deliberate, like light slowly filling a room that had forgotten what brightness felt like. Anna remained still, her hands resting with the same precision, but now there was something different beneath them, something that answered back with more certainty than before. The soldier's breathing, once fragile and uncertain, began to find a steadier rhythm, each inhale slightly deeper. Then the last, each exhale less hesitant. It was not strong. It was not safe. But it was real. And that was enough to hold on to. The medic noticed it next, his eyes widening just slightly before he caught himself, adjusting his posture as if to contain the moment rather than disturb it. He reached for a cloth, moving carefully, mirroring Anna's restraint, understanding now that every action inside this space carried weight. Captain Walker stood near the edge of the tent, his presence no longer commanding the room, but observing it with a different kind of attention. He had stepped out of the center without leaving, allowing something else to take its place. His gaze followed the subtle changes, the way tension eased from shoulders, the way movement returned without urgency, the way silence no longer felt like uncertainty but like focus. He had seen men fight to hold control in situations like this, tightening their grip when things did not follow plan. But control, he realized, was not always something you held. Sometimes it was something you released. Anna shifted her right hand slightly, testing the response once more, not searching for confirmation, but for continuity. The answer came, faint but consistent, like a signal that had chosen not to disappear. She held there, steady, giving it space to strengthen without interference. Her face remained calm, unreadable, not because she felt nothing, but because she did not allow feeling to interfere with what needed to be done. Across the tent, a soldier leaned back against a wooden post, his posture loosening as the weight of uncertainty lifted just enough to breathe again. No one spoke. Words would have been unnecessary, almost intrusive, in a moment defined by what could be seen and felt without explanation. Walker glanced down briefly at his hands, then back at Anna, as if recalibrating something internal, something that had shifted without his permission. He had been trained to trust orders, to rely on structure, to believe that clarity came from command. But clarity, in this moment, had come from stillness, from a refusal to act when action would have ended everything too soon. The rain outside had nearly stopped now, leaving only a faint drip from the edges of the canvas, a quiet reminder that the world continued beyond the boundaries of this space. Inside, the soldier's breathing held steady, no longer fragile. In the same way, no longer on the edge of disappearing. Anna finally allowed herself a single, almost imperceptible adjustment, easing her hands back just slightly, not removing them, but changing their role from holding to guiding. It was a small shift, but it marked a transition. Not an ending. Not a victory. But a continuation. And sometimes, in a place where endings came too easily, continuation was enough. The room no longer felt suspended between two outcomes. It had chosen a direction, quietly, without announcement, and everything inside it adjusted to follow. Anna's hands remained close, no longer holding with the same pressure, but guiding, steady and attentive, as if she understood that what came next required a different kind of care. The soldier's breathing settled into a rhythm that no longer fought itself, each inhale meeting the next without hesitation, each exhale carrying less uncertainty than before. It was not strong enough to declare safety, but it was stable enough to protect. The medic moved with more confidence now, his actions no longer tentative, but still measured, careful not to disturb the balance that had been created. He handed Anna what she needed without words, his timing aligned with hers, as if he had learned her language without ever being taught it. Across the tent, the others began to shift back into motion, not with urgency, but with a quiet awareness that something important had just passed through the room and left its mark. Captain Walker remained where he was, his posture relaxed in a way that would have been unrecognizable an hour earlier. He watched the final adjustments, the way Anna transitioned from intervention to observation, her hands now resting lightly, ready but no longer required to hold everything in place. He had seen moments like this before, but they had always belonged to reports, to numbers, to outcomes recorded after the fact. This one was different. He had stood inside it. He had almost interrupted it. And that realization stayed with him longer than he expected. Anna finally lifted her hands, not quickly, not dramatically, but with the same control she had shown from the beginning, removing them only when there was no longer a reason to keep them there. She did not step back immediately. She remained for a second, watching, confirming what she already knew, then allowed herself to shift her weight, creating space. Without leaving entirely. The soldier remained, breathing on his own, the fragile rhythm now his to carry. The medic exhaled fully this time, a quiet release that signaled the end of something he had not been sure would resolve. Walker took a single step closer, not to intervene, but to see for himself what had been accomplished without his command. He looked at the soldier, then at Anna, his expression unreadable, not because there was nothing there, but because what was there did not need to be spoken. He gave a small nod, not formal, not official, just enough to acknowledge what had happened. Anna met his gaze briefly, her expression calm, unchanged, as if nothing extraordinary had occurred, as if she had simply done what was required and nothing more. And in that exchange, brief and unremarkable to anyone else, something settled between them. Not agreement. Not understanding. But recognition. Walker turned away first, his steps measured as he moved toward the edge of the tent, the sounds of the outside world returning gradually, reminding him of everything that still demanded his attention. But the pace of his movement had changed, just slightly, as if he carried something with him that had not been there before. Behind him, Anna remained beside the table, her presence quiet once again, her hands now still, no longer holding a life in place, but having already ensured it could continue without her. The tent slowly returned to its ordinary rhythm, but something within it had shifted in a way that could not be reversed. The urgency that once filled every corner had softened into a steady, controlled pace, as if the room itself had learned to breathe again. Anna stepped back fully now, her hands no longer needed, her posture relaxed but not careless, her attention still present even without direct contact. She reached for a clean cloth, moving with the same quiet precision, wiping her hands methodically, not as a sign of completion, but as a continuation of discipline. The medic beside her adjusted the blanket over the soldier with care, his movements slower than before, guided by what he had just witnessed rather than what he had been taught. He checked the breathing again, not out of doubt, but out of respect for how fragile the moment still was. Captain Walker paused near the entrance of the tent, the muted light from outside outlining his figure against the canvas. He did not leave immediately. Instead, he stood there for a few seconds longer than necessary, his gaze moving back once more toward the table, toward Anna, toward the space where his order had once held absolute weight. He replayed it in his mind, not the words themselves, but the moment that followed, the refusal that had not felt like resistance, the silence that had not challenged him, but had outlasted him. He had spent years believing that clarity came from speaking first, from deciding quickly, from ensuring that no space was left for uncertainty. But what he had seen was something else entirely. A form of clarity that did not need to announce itself. A certainty that did not rely on authority to exist. Outside, a jeep engine started, the low rumble cutting through the quiet, pulling him back toward the responsibilities waiting beyond the tent. He straightened slightly, not out of tension, but out of habit, preparing to step back into a world that required decisions without hesitation. Yet as he took his first step forward, he slowed, just enough to feel the difference in his own movement. Behind him, Anna moved to the side table, organizing instruments with the same calm efficiency, restoring order without drawing attention to it. There was no sign of what had just occurred in her expression, no indication that she expected acknowledgement or recognition. To anyone entering now, it would appear as nothing more than a routine moment in a place defined by constant motion. And perhaps that was what made it matter more. Walker stepped out into the open air, the cool dampness of the ground beneath his boots grounding him in the present, the sounds of distant voices and moving vehicles returning to their usual volume. But something remained with him, quiet and persistent, like a thought that refused to fade. He did not speak of it. He did not need to. Because what had changed was not the situation, not the war, not the structure he operated within. What had changed was smaller. Internal. A recalibration he could not ignore. Inside the tent, the soldier continued to breathe, steady and uninterrupted, the fragile rhythm now holding on its own. Anna glanced once more in his direction, not to check, but to confirm what she already knew, then turned away, her role complete without ceremony. The moment passed without announcement, but it left something behind that would not easily be undone. The night settled slowly over the camp, not as a sudden change, but as a gradual dimming of everything that had once felt urgent. The sounds outside softened into distance, engines fading, voices lowering, footsteps becoming less frequent as the rhythm of the day gave way to something quieter. Inside the tent, the lantern burned low, casting a steady glow over the wooden table where the soldier now rested, his breathing consistent, no longer fragile in the same way, no longer at risk of disappearing between one moment and the next. Anna stood near the side table, her hands still, her posture composed, as if the work she had done required no reflection, no pause, no recognition. She had already moved forward, not in thought, but in presence, returning to the quiet discipline that defined her. The medic adjusted a small instrument, then stepped back, his movements careful even now, as if the memory of what had almost been lost still guided his hands. He glanced once at Anna, not expecting acknowledgement, but offering it silently, a kind of respect that did not need words. She did not look at him. Not out of disregard, but because she understood that what mattered had already been done. Outside, Captain Walker stood beneath the open sky, the cool air settling around him as he looked out over the camp, where scattered lights marked the positions of tents and vehicles, each one holding its own story, its own urgency, its own decisions waiting to be made. He held his gloves in one hand, turning them slightly, not with intention, but with thought that had not yet formed into something clear. He had followed orders his entire life, and then given them, believing in the structure they created, in the clarity they provided. And they had been right. Most of the time. But not always. He exhaled slowly, his breath visible in the cooler air, and for a brief moment, he allowed himself to stand without deciding anything, without preparing the next instruction, without measuring the next outcome. The tent behind him remained quiet, its presence steady, almost unremarkable against the larger movement of the camp. And yet, it held something that the rest of the world did not. Something that had not been written into any report, not recorded in any log, not passed along through any chain of command. A moment where a single decision had not been enforced, but observed. Where authority had not been diminished, but redefined. Walker glanced back once, not long, just enough to see the faint outline of the canvas, to remember the stillness that had taken place inside. Then he turned forward again, his posture unchanged, his role the same, but his understanding no longer identical to what it had been before. Inside, Anna finished arranging the last of the instruments, then paused for a brief second, her gaze resting not on the soldier, not on the medic, but somewhere in between, as if acknowledging something that did not need to be named. Then she moved again, quietly, efficiently, returning to the rhythm of a place where moments like this were rare, but never forgotten by those who witnessed them. No one spoke of what had happened. No one needed to. Because some things did not belong to words. They belonged to the space between them. She did not raise her voice. She raised the standard.